Good morning. This is Friday morning, and this is Justice on Air. We're on air 10 to 11 each Friday here on the Hill Country Patriot Radio, broadcasting on FM dial 104.3 in Kerrville, 102.1 in Fredericksburg, and 98.7 Ingram Hunt. Welcome to the program. We're going to have a couple of guests this morning, and we're going to have with us former Mayor Bonnie White, former mayor of Kerrville, Texas. And we're going to have Brenda Hughes, who's one of the owners of Buzzy's Barbecue. She's going to be here to talk about the TERS petition. So tune in, get ready for some pretty interesting conversation. Also, I want to give out the text line 833-828-6537. If you got some questions during the program, you want to text that in, we'll try to get them answered for you. And that's 833-828-6537. Now, Bonnie, so tell us what your topic is this morning. It probably has something to do with the city council last Tuesday night.
Yeah, well, there was an issue, and I think that's why you asked me to kind of talk about some of the details from the meeting Tuesday night. There was an issue that had to do with real property exchange between the city of Kerrville and the adjacent property owners to City Hall, which is the Kalu Foundation Properties LLC. And just as a little bit of history on that, Doyle, I think about 2009, there was a bond issue for a new City Hall. At least that was a portion of what that $10 million bond was to fund. I was at that meeting that evening, and I do remember that it was really going to be a utility bond. There were some things they wanted to fund that included streets and drainage, parks, water, wastewater, and at the last moment, one of the council members, Chuck Coleman, amended that to also include municipal facilities. So that $10 million bond was to fund all of those improvements. That having been said, there was a lot of discussion about the crammed quarters of the City Hall at that time, which was right there on Junction Highway 800, Junction Highway, you may remember, next to the Del Norte. That was where the old City Hall, it had been, a phone company? Is that what it was before that? Anyway, so this is kind of an interesting aside. You said it was going to be an interesting program. We'll try to work on that. But there were it was about 12,700 square feet in the old City Hall building. And it housed approximately 50 employees. So the concept at the time was to build a nicer, bigger building. They had a lot of discussion about where that should be. There was a lot of input from citizens. Eventually, they ended up having land donated to them downtown where the old hospital building stood. Interestingly, they approved the bond in 2009. I believe they started construction in 2011, occupied in 2012. I think is correct. I may be wrong on that. I wasn't in office yet, but the new City Hall turned out indeed to be 15,500 approximately square feet. That's what it carries on the rolls today. But instead of bringing a lot more employees under roof, which was the express need at the time, instead of 50 people, it actually houses about 25 people. So we went down in the number of employees.
Yeah, okay, so I noticed that the code enforcement is underneath in the office space, underneath the parking
garage, yeah.
Does the city lease that, or do they?
No, that was part of the property that the Kalu Foundation purchased from the hospital and corporation or foundation. And so when they bought that property, the parking garage and the attached offices came with it. It was not all conveyed immediately. The parking garage, I believe, was actually just conveyed this past year, but now all of it belongs. But you're exactly right. There wasn't space provided in the new City Hall building for development services, which includes code enforcement. So they now are housed underneath the parking garage, which, by the way, floods every time it rains.
is that, when you said 25 employees, does that include them? Is that?
No, I'm saying in the main
In the main
building,
building.
which was supposed to bring all of these entities under roof and give more room to house all the employees in one location. Instead, it houses fewer than the original City Hall building on Junction Highway. So that's just kind of an interesting aside. The question that you had concerning today's exchange, if you will, it was discovered by a local citizen about a year ago, or maybe a year and a half ago, that actually it would have been 2 years ago, because Todd Parton was still the city manager at the time. But it was brought to my attention as a new council member that the exchange, when the Kalu Foundation Properties LLC donated the land for the footprint for the new City Hall building to the city. They own, as you know, most of the other half of that block. The Shriner Goods Store and the Cartwheels and all of that is owned by their foundation properties. And when they gave that or deeded that property to the city, we all assumed that the entry into the City Hall area, the parking lot off of Main Street, north of the property, we all assumed that that property was all deeded to the city, where the City Hall footprint stands and where the driveway and parking lot currently sit, right? A lot of people don't know that the park area that's in front of City Hall, or to the east of City Hall, doesn't belong to the city. That was retained by the Kalu Foundation Properties.
So let me get this straight. So the part of the lot that has the arc, I think there's an arc there, it says
Right.
City of Kerrville.
Yes, on the corner.
That doesn't belong to the city.
Yes, that would.
That would.
The part that it was discovered was not deeded to the city, and this is what the meeting Tuesday night was to try to clarify and shore up and mitigate, if you will, was the City Hall sits on about 0.66 of an acre. It did include some of the grass, a little bit past the flagpole, onto the parking lot on the other side where Cartwheels is, which all belongs to the Kalu Foundation Properties, okay? So the 0.66 of an acre was the footprint of the City Hall, the parking lot off of Junction Highway, except for a small plot of 0.11 acre. It's a 0.11 acre tract that included the driveway into City Hall from the Main Street side.
From the Main Street side.
Yes, by the courthouse, on the courthouse side.
And they got that blocked off, they don't let you drive in there, right?
Well, it's two portions. The 0.11 is the driveway you enter. The rest of what looks like an entry is still part of the Kalu Properties. And they have it blocked off for whatever reason, I don't know. Originally, I believe Clyde Parker was the owner of all of that, up to the old post office, if you will, which is now the Arts and Culture Center.
Right.
So they used a driveway. If you remember the old Shriner store, Brenda, and maybe you too, Doyle, I'm sure you've shopped there just quite often. I know I did.
My favorite hot spot.
Yeah, right. I saw your car there many times. But they had a driveway behind those buildings that they owned, and that's part of what is blocked off, I would assume, today. Still belongs, is retained by the Kalu Foundation Properties. So it was brought to my attention. I mentioned it after Mr. Parton was gone. Apparently, what happened was, although that 0.11 of an acre, which includes the entry into the City Hall on the north side, was not conveyed, the recorded plat, or the plat that was filed and signed off on by Mr. Parton as city manager, said that the city did own it. So a citizen discovered that, who deals in that line of work, brought it to my attention, then as mayor. And so by then, I brought it to the attention of the current city manager as a potential issue. So it carried along for a long while. I guess we got involved in other issues that were more important, but finally through Councilman Vogel now, this was reiterated as an issue that he wanted to bring up.
Oh, just a second. We have a little.
No,
Okay, we are. All right.
Okay.
A little technical problem there, but I think it's cleared up now. Go ahead.
Okay. And so Mr. Vogel put it on the agenda he's been working on this for a number of months. He felt like this was an issue that needed to be handled. As you know, there is a reversionary clause in the deed of the land from Caloos to the city. And if that building that we now occupy as City Hall ever ceases to be used as a city hall, it will go back to the foundation.
Right.
So if that was part of the reason, if it was just an oversight, I don't know. I'm not pointing any fingers necessarily. I'm just saying this was the issue they were trying to resolve at the meeting Tuesday night. What I didn't understand, I knew that the entry was not a deeded entry. It was not an easement or anything. So actually the first parking lot facing Main Street was a trespass all this time that the city since 2012. Anybody who parked in that first parking space facing Main Street was actually in trespass. So to the adjoining property. So this needed to be resolved, and Mr. Vogel brought that forward and finally got it on the agenda. What they ended up with was doing an exchange. This was kind of an interesting thing. I didn't realize until I viewed the meeting on Tuesday night, but there was also a parcel on the opposite side that was deeded that the city had not access to, that adjoined the sidewalk to the stairwell to the parking garage. So in effect, what was occurring for these last number of years is that city visitors did not have entry or egress or ingress on either side to City Hall. So you couldn't use the portion of the sidewalk. We were in trespass, is my understanding, from the sidewalk on the Cartwheel side to the parking garage, because that was our other, that we do own, but without entry, without ingress and egress, we had neither side accessible legally to the current City Hall. So that's what he put on the agenda to try to mitigate. And so in exchange, and I think this probably has to do with Texas real estate law for municipalities, you can't just give property to an individual. It has to be that it's of benefit to the city to do so. So I believe the argument was we gave the foundation properties some more of the parkland, the park in front of City Hall, if you will, which they had been maintaining anyway. The city had not been maintaining. And I'll tell you honestly, I thought that Caloos Foundation Properties owned all of the park area completely anyway. So I found out there was a little strip of grass that was in the city footprint, and they gave that back to the properties in exchange for the entryway on both sides to City Hall.
Easy.
Yes.
Okay.
And I don't know if they gave it fee simple or if it's an easement. I'm not sure how that'll be reflected in the deed, but I know Councilman Vogel said do not file the plat, please, until we have the deeds in hand.
Right, yeah. Let's not make the same mistake twice.
Right.
Okay, so yeah, and I thought it was interesting, and I guess you can go back and look at the video, but I thought it was interesting how, people make mistakes, City Hall makes mistakes, whatever. I mean, it's not that big a deal. We got it straightened out, that's fine. But it was the comment from the mayor Tuesday night, who basically, I don't want the public to know about this. So, I thought that was kind of weird. Talk about transparency. We don't want everybody to know that the city council made a mistake.
I think the comment was, we don't want the public to know. Journalists are here. We don't want the public to know that the city made a mistake. And so Councilman Baruti said, well, they're right there. Just tell them don't print it.
Don't print it. So I just, because he didn't want the public to know that, I just felt compelled to tell you that's what the mayor said. So,
Well, it's fixed now. That the bottom line is, I appreciate the fact that, these kinds of things, maybe you're right, could happen. I'm not going to pass a legal judgment on why the plat was signed, and there was knowledge that did not belong to the city. We do have a city attorney. We have legal representation.
I'm pretty sure it was a mistake, and government makes mistakes.
Sure.
People make mistakes. But,
Sure.
we don't hide those mistakes there, Blackburn. We just admit that we made them and we move on. Okay, so I'm going to move on. Let's take a little break. We'll take a little station break. When we come back, we're going to talk to Brenda Hughes back in just a minute. Welcome back to Justice on Air. This is Doyle Weaver, and we're on air here with our guest, former Mayor Bonnie White, and she spoke just a few minutes to an issue that occurred last Tuesday night and in the City Hall. But we also have in our studio today, or this morning, we have Brenda Hughes.
Good morning.
Good morning, Brenda. How are you?
I'm good, thank
Do
you.
you see you in the right place?
Yeah.
And so what we're here about today is you have a petition to the City of Kerrville, Kerr County, Texas.
Yes, I do.
And tell us about this petition.
Okay, this relates to the tax increment reinvestment zone. It's known as the TERS. And that ordinance got passed a couple of weeks ago, and because many questions were not answered about this TERS, we went to a council member to try and get those questions answered, and he was kind of shot down when trying to address those questions during council meeting. So we decided, after we had a town hall meeting and got some of our questions answered, to initiate a petition. And it's an initiative petition, whereas there's two initiatives on the petition. The first one is to terminate the reinvestment zone. It's number 1, City of Kerrville. It's via the ordinance 2018-19. And we want to terminate that and put it to, the initiative number 2 is to require voter approval for creation of any or all reinvestment zones, any portion of which falls within the city limits of Kerrville. And my original question still stands, is when this TERS zone came out, it was a huge zone. It encompassed something like 477 acres of land. It included some residential areas. It started, okay, and help me out here, Bonnie, because you know exactly where the boundary lines are, but I know it starts at Francisco Lemus, and it goes all the way down to San Saba Cap Company there on Water and Broadway, and then it goes up to Murda.
Well, if you start at the Riverside Nature Center and you go up Francisco Lemos, and then you jaunt over to Pascal,
Yes.
it goes up Pascal to, I believe it's East Davis, you go east there, and then I'm not sure of the down street, Clay or
Hayes, one of those, yeah.
Hayes. And then it'll go down to Barnett, and Barnett over across 16 to Earl Garrett. It goes up Earl Garrett, back down. It goes all the way down from Earl Garrett to Jefferson.
Yes.
And that will go east over to the middle school, the administrative area, Tybee Street, goes down Tybee, goes over to Park, takes in some of that area, down to Memorial, you're right, Broadway, and then links up at kind of the Y, at the Meek real estate office towards the college. And then it goes back towards town. And then it goes all along the river, let's just say basically till you meet back up to the Riverside Nature Center.
Yes, and
with a few little jaunts, you're right.
It's just
indexes, yes.
And what the TERS does is your property tax rate, or not the rate, but what you pay in property taxes right now on your business or on your residence, it kind of gets frozen, and then future property tax increases, that money now goes into a TERS fund, so to speak.
TIF.
Yes, and not into the general fund. So what I'm maintaining is that the money that would be going to the general fund through normal growth, okay, is now encompassed into the TERS. And I think that the people outside the TERS, they'll be burdened with property tax increases to replace the general fund, and then the businesses and the residences inside the TERS, their money's going to go to a select few in the downtown revitalization district, so to speak, and they won't have the access to the TERS money, so to speak, because they're not in the plan, which none of us have seen yet.
Okay, but here's a question. It just occurred to me, and I don't know the answer. Maybe you know, Bonnie or Brenda. So this is property tax, not sales tax,
Right.
But does this also include like the personal property tax where businesses pay tax? It's just only
It's
the real.
ad valorem.
Yeah,
My understanding is it's ad valorem tax.
it's only on real
Yes,
property.
yes, because any increase in that, let's make it clear, Brenda, and I think you did well, but it's not that the property owner is going to be frozen. We have to
Right.
be careful when we say that.
Yes.
They're going to keep paying increased
Yeah.
assessments,
Right.
but it's just the increase in that dollar
From
amount
the
this year
amount.
forward. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and it's only going to be on the real estate.
Yes, and any new property would all go into the TIF.
Right.
Okay, which, in my opinion, this is opinion here. I think that the first thing we're going to see probably right after the first of the year is a bond issue, so they can get millions of dollars to put in the little kitty, and then the TERS money they collect over the years will be going to pay the interest. So there's not going to be any money available for the general fund or even to spend on the infrastructure or the police or EMS or whatever the new downtown TERS zone is going to require. And so all the property owners outside that TERS, or inside too, I guess you can say, but all the property owners are going to have increased taxes. So number one, first step will be you'll see the bond issue. Number two, you'll see we got to have more tax money. So it's going to follow, and that's what we'll probably see next year sometime, based on all of this. Okay, any other comments?
Formulated from a legal standpoint, because of course nobody made it easy for us to obtain a petition in the first place, but we do have one, and it is legal, and it is at Buzzy's Barbecue for signatures beginning today.
Okay, what's that address?
213 Shriner Street
Okay.
in Kerrville.
And so there is a petition at your place of business right now for people to go in and sign. Now they're going to have to be, I believe the rules are they have to be a registered voter
In the city of Kerrville.
in the city, not just the county. So if you're a county resident, you cannot sign this petition.
That's
We
correct.
ask you not to because you're going to throw our figures off and we're going to screw up.
Right. We actually need 1,427 signatures from city voters.
City voters. So if you are a registered City of Kerrville voter and you don't want your taxes to be increased and you don't want the city to go in debt further than it already is in debt, then you probably ought to hustle down to Buzzy's Barbecue on Shriner
Yeah,
Street.
and the petition is to actually terminate the TERS, which that election is on May the 5th or 6th, something around there. And then we want to terminate the TERS, and then we want any future TERS to be placed on a ballot for vote. You know, and then if the majority says, "Hey, we need this," then I can live with that. But right now, I don't think that that's the case.
No, I don't think so either. And so I think that one of the other things we might want to solicit out here on the air is that if you have a business in Kerrville and you would like to make this petition available to your patrons, can they contact you? Maybe.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, they can come by Buzzy's and talk to either Buzzy or myself, and we can get you a petition that you can start circulating.
Right. So that I would encourage all the businesses, especially if you're one of those businesses that's realizes that you're probably not going to be the one that gets the money out of this deal. You might want to get you a little petition out there and see if you can get some signatures on that petition. Then let's get this moving. 1,427
27 is what we're looking at, but I mean, ideally, we want the ones that are signing to also be the ones that are voting in May.
Yes.
So in order for us to defeat this thing, we probably need about 2,500 signatures or votes.
Okay, we don't need that many to get it on the ballot.
That's correct.
But you're estimating we'll need about 2,500 people to actually vote.
Yes.
Okay, so, and that's what I think we need to point out and make clear. Signing the petition is only certifying that you're in favor of putting it on the ballot.
That's right.
Okay, and really, I think that's good government. And when you
Yeah, and when we defeated the UDC, we defeated it by a margin of 3-1. And we wound up having about 3,400 people who voted against that UDC. And this is the exact same thing.
Okay, so here we go again. This is what we want to do here is have good government. Let's put these issues to the vote of the people and not just leave it up to thin margin of city council members. And I think it was a 3-1 vote.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
One had to abstain, I believe, because he had conflict of interest. I'm not sure why Ekner didn't have a conflict of interest since she's a real estate person, but apparently she didn't.
Yeah, that would be a pretty broad interpretation. Councilman Vogel necessarily had to recuse because he derives more than 50% of his income from his father's business, which is located in the TERS. So the conflict of interest, I think it's Code 171, declares that if you have a different economic impact because of property you own or a business you own or a business you work for, then you have to recuse, whether that impact would be up or down. Doyle, I don't know where you want to go with this exactly.
Before we get there, let's take a little break.
Okay.
And we'll come back and we'll pick up again with the TERS. Welcome back. This is Doyle Weaver, Justice on Air. And we've got our guest here, the former mayor, Bonnie White, Kerrville, Texas, and Brenda Hughes, who's the owner of Buzzy's Barbecue in Kerrville. And both are here this morning in the studio. And we're talking right now about a new petition to the city of Kerrville to put on the ballot in May two different initiatives that have to do with the TERS, which is the reinvestment zone. Tell me again what the TERS stands for.
Okay, it stands for Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone. And the sad part about all this, Doyle, is that there are still so many people out there that don't know anything about this thing. I found out about it, I guess, a month ago or so, and right away I'm trying to organize a town hall so that I can get better informed about this thing. And of course, because I am in the zone, I wanted to know why I hadn't been notified as a stakeholder about this zone that they were capturing me in. And so I did a open records request, and I asked for all the names of the stakeholders that were notified, because I'd heard at a city council meeting, somebody made the comment, I guess the city manager had made the comment that they had sent, between 400 and 500 letters out to all the stakeholders. So I wanted that list, and did an open records request, got the list, which only encompassed about 280 names on it, of which I was not on there. And neither were several of the other businesses.
Well, they're not going to put you on there, right?
Well, at the time, I could not possibly have been viewed as a threat. I mean, but anyway, so
I'm glad it's you for a change.
Yeah. So I passed this list on to Bonnie, and she made some phone calls. And what did you find out, Bonnie?
Yeah, Brenda asked me how we would find out, and I suggested she do the open records request. And indeed, they did return a list of names of stakeholders that were supposedly notified. And I think maybe part of the confusion, the letter that you asked for subsequently, which wasn't provided the first time around, was actually the 1st of March to some stakeholders, I presume, perhaps the list. But it didn't reference the TERS.
Right.
The letter that you showed to me
yes.
that they provided was a letter talking about
the 2050
downtown
plan.
Revitalization and how that's incorporated in the 2050 plan. but it did not specifically reference the TERS.
Right.
That was right in the midst of a pretty wild and crazy campaign for me, and I can't remember why I didn't attend that meeting. The consultant that we hired did do a presentation at the Calu Theater. It was not posted as a meeting because there was not a quorum present. But I think if there was some confusion, but I did indeed call 6 or 8 people that I knew on the list. I knew others, but people that I knew well, I felt more comfortable calling. I did call. And none of those, except for the First Assembly of God Church pastor, remembered receiving any kind of letter. So perhaps, like I said, perhaps it was the confusion. There were 2 law offices. One was the county judge's law office, as a matter of fact, and they did not remember receiving a letter that was on that list that you provided to me. So I'm glad you had the town hall, and perhaps you will continue to do so for those. I did listen at this last vote, this last council meeting. I don't believe any citizens spoke.
No.
But the one before, a great number of citizens spoke,
they did.
and there seemed to be still some great confusion. And Doyle, you mentioned transparency, and that's the name of the game. I realize there are people that don't take the paper, and there are people who don't listen to radio, and there's people that, so you can't cover all of your bases. But surely something this encompassing, they need to feel a great deal of comfort in doing before they pass it. It's a done deal now, so you are forced to do what you're doing because you're not convinced, as I take it, that this would benefit. They did have a pretty extensive packet contained in the agenda packet for this last Tuesday meeting that talked about the plan. That's what they voted on this last meeting. One of the issues they had is that the city council, according to the ordinance that you referenced in the petition, that ordinance is what actually established the TERS. And in that, it established the council members as also the board of the TERS. So you have the same board for the TERS as you do for the council.
Yeah, it was a little ridiculous to watch the other night at City Council because they actually went into a board meeting and discussed some issues, and then came out of the board meeting and then voted as council on the stuff that they had.
Recommendations.
Yes,
from the
yes,
board.
and it's such a conflict of interest in my mind. And of course, one of the council members made the had the discussion about adding some other members to the board, because I think they realize that a lot of the people that spoke at a previous council meeting, one of the things that they addressed was the fact that the board is also the council. Right. So there's really kind of no policing or anything of the decisions that are made with regards to this TERS.
Yeah, and they do the same procedure when we do the employee benefit trust, but that only has to do with employees of the city. So that has there's a legal reason why they do it. But this involves the citizens of the community and a large tax.
Okay, so it's I didn't watch the video, and I didn't attend the council meeting, but so I'm asking this question. So they actually, in council, they didn't go back into chambers somewhere and do
No,
private.
that's correct. No, it was a public meeting,
Yes.
and anything that the TERS board recommends, the council has to ultimately approve. So that part is transparent, and that any project plan or the ordinance itself will be approved, by the council. And that will always be an open meeting. So I don't have any.
But there's no requirement that they would have to have those board meetings during the council meeting.
No, that's right. That's right. And one of those issues, quickly before I jump into the TERS itself, is that there is a 5-member board comprised of the 5 members of council. Unfortunately, Mr. Vocal, as we mentioned earlier, has to recuse, so that every time the TERS board meets, he will have to recuse, and I don't believe that meets the minimum requirements of state law. I think they have to have a 5-member board.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So, because we already know ahead of time that he can't participate.
That's right. So he'll never be able to
So he's
vote.
disqualified to be a member of the board.
Exactly.
Right.
So I think he brought that issue up, and they'll be discussing that at a later time. The issue Tuesday night and the meeting before, I think as Brenda mentioned earlier, is that when they voted on it, there wasn't a plan. In part, I can see why they did it that way, why that would happen, because it's the board that has to approve the plan, and you can't approve a plan
Without
until you're a
board.
board, so they had
Right.
to become a board first. So that, I will excuse that.
Mhm.
And there was a kind of broad-termed plan, preliminary plan presented. And so Tuesday night was supposed to be the plan
Right.
that they adopted. And I think Mr. Baruti's objection is that it wasn't specific enough. I was interested to see, let's just talk about a lot of things they can do. The TERS allows a broad array of action that can be taken with the TIF funds. That's the tax increment fund. And I mean, it's very broad. And I think what maybe in my mind, because I was not in this, I was already out of office when they really got into the weeds on this, is that it makes it a lot easier, if you will, to spend that tax money
Right.
than you would under normal circumstances. In other words, as you mentioned, if it went all into the general fund. One of the arguments is, and one of the predictions is, that these businesses that they'll be able to entice, if you will, by improving infrastructure or offering facade grants
Tax
or other
abatement.
kind of economic grants. Well, this is specifically how we give the TIF money.
Yes.
Aside from the tax abatements, is how do we distribute this TIF money? And this is, I think, Brenda's concern and others who own businesses in that area. What kind of say are we going to have? They said it's first come, first serve. But this is the breakdown that they gave in the packet. It looks like about 30% of it will go to facilities and improvements. This is their breakdown of how it can be spent. Sanitary sewer facilities and improvements. I don't know what that would involve. Stormwater facilities improvements, and all of these land things and infrastructure issues, which basically, again, would benefit more a truly blighted area. I don't know what specifically they're talking about. I think this is what Councilman Baruti was asking. How did the consultant come up with this breakdown? What kind of infrastructure needs to be improved? We know the Legion lift station for a lot of economic development, but that's already underway. We already went to the Water Development Board and we have that financing already underway. We've known that for a long time. What are the other infrastructure improvements? I don't know. Sanitary sewer facilities and improvements. I don't know. But that's included in that. Then we have transit and parking improvements, 10%, 1.7 million. There's been some talk of another parking garage in a portion of downtown. Well, that needs to be carefully looked at. Is that going to be another eyesore right in the middle of pedestrian traffic? I don't know. And then street and intersection improvements, 2.5 million. That's 15% of the fund. Then open space, park, and recreational facilities, 3 million. That's 18% of the projected TIF fund, which is 17 million is what they're projecting over 30 years. So I don't know. Where are those parks and where are those improvements? And then economic development grants is 4 million. So it is the bulk of the TIF funds, or 25% of it, is going to go to economic development grants. And that's the first come, first serve thing. So you can use it for private buildings, public buildings, new buildings, old buildings. You can use it for acquisition purposes, construction, remediation, remodeling, preservation, demolition, acquisition of land or of equipment. So it's pretty broad. You can also use it for professional services, architecture, engineering, that can be paid for out of this TIF fund. And then I noticed, interestingly, Doyle and Brenda, that it can also be used to reimburse city administrative cost and professional services. So, in other words, a lot of the city input can be paid for out of the TERS, the TIF fund accompanying the TERS. The cost of operating the reinvestment zone and the project facilities. So operational costs can be paid for out of the TIF.
Like a slush fund.
Well, what it does is all of that money now, I can see that they're assuring developers that, look, this money now is off the table for the rest of the population, general fund.
Right.
It is specifically going to go to improvements in your area. So I can understand
And
in
we'll tell
blighted
you
and
where you can make your campaign contributions.
well, here's something that was interesting on the list, and like I said, I wasn't a part of these conversations, but they're predicting 7,500 square feet of retail commercial in 2019. I don't know if that's the HEB expansion, but that was already in the works. If so, retail commercial 9,500 square feet, office 12,500 square feet by 2020. Residential, 54,000 square feet or 50 units of residential space by 2020. And of course, the infamous hotel or the whatever.
Convention center, whatever.
Well, it doesn't say. It says hotel, but that's 27,000, almost 28,000 square feet.
All pie in the sky.
They're predicting by 2020, but that they already know. I don't think these are predictive. I
Right.
think these are
They
already
know it's
things that they know.
Okay, we're running a little bit short time here, so I want to make sure we talk about the petition in particular. So again, for those who tuned in late, Brenda, tell us what the petition is. As a matter of fact, why don't you read the initiative
Okay.
for us?
There's two initiatives on the petition. Initiative number 1 says, terminate reinvestment zone number 1, City of Kerrville, parentheses, TERS, parentheses, which was created via Ordinance 2018-19. Termination to be effective immediately upon passage by voters in a general election. Initiative number 2 is to require voter approval for creation of any/all reinvestment zones, parentheses, TERS, parentheses, any portion of which falls within the city limits of Kerrville.
And so what's your only thing and you initiated this petition.
Yes.
But the main thing you wanted to do was you thought, and I'm putting words in your mouth and you can say yes or no, but you thought that this is such of an importance to the city residents that they ought to be the ones by vote
That's right.
to make this determination, not just a vote from the city council. Is that right?
That's exactly right. I mean, and by virtue of the fact that they really kept this a great big giant secret, because from what I understand, there's supposed to be some legislation coming down in January that restricts a lot of what goes on within a TERS. And so they wanted to rush this thing through before legislation came through in January, and they forgot to talk to the people that they work for. So my petition is a way to get the people to voice how they feel about this TERS.
And I think her urgency, Doyle, and I'm not saying one way or the other, the good or the bad, but I think her urgency is that the meeting the other night, which she attended, the consultant spoke and someone made a reference to, well, it's a slow building fund, this TIF, because it's just the increment in taxes. And he said, yeah, but it wouldn't limit you because you can always borrow against
Yeah,
that.
and that's what they plan on doing.
And so I
Right.
think what I heard is that the limitation might be on the definitions of blighted and what
Yes.
would already be on the books.
Well, we're probably going to have to take this up at a later time and put some more time into this because we're out of time this morning. So I just want to encourage you to go by Buzzy's Barbecue on Shriner Street and sign this petition. If you're a business that can also promote this petition, pick up a copy of it for your own business. And let's get this rolling. This is Doyle Weaver, Justice on Air. See you next Friday.